Welcome back to the Untriggered Parenting Podcast with me, Paula Sampson Lawrence. On this episode, my special guest is Lorraine Connell. Lorraine is a veteran educator of over 20 years. Today, we talk about the importance of developing leadership skills within teenagers and how it enhances their social and emotional learning. Let's dive in. Welcome, Lorraine, to the show. Welcome to the podcast. Lovely to have you here. So, please do introduce yourself so we can get to know you a lot better.
Yeah, Paula, thank you so much for having me and inviting me onto this incredible platform. As you know, I'm sure directly, parents, there's not a lot of resources out here to help us. And so the more that we can provide them, the greater it is. So I'm really grateful.
Absolutely.
So you asked me who I am. So I am a former educator. I spent 20 years teaching high school sophomores chemistry, and I saw a gap in students who were afforded opportunities to develop leadership and the rest of the students who were not. And when I saw that gap, a couple of things happened for me. One, I saw that we were sort of putting kids with leadership titles on pedestals that they weren't really equipped to know how to navigate. And if they fell off that pedestal, we didn't often really give them a leg up back onto that pedestal. And if they made a mistake, we ripped the pedestal out from underneath them. Yeah. And that really impacted students one at a time, where we thought we were doing a really great job. And we were telling all the rest of the students, you don't want to make this mistake. And that was a really great message for everybody except for the one student who made that mistake. And that one student learned the worst lessons that you could possibly learn. Number one, hide your mistakes. Number two, blame other people for your mistakes. And number three, if you make a mistake that's really big, there's no way to come back from them.
Yeah.
And that hurt. You know, I didn't want kids to leave high school in these leadership roles learning those lessons. And then I also saw 90% of the other kids saying, well, I make mistakes, so I better not put my hat in the ring for that leadership role because I don't want the same thing to happen to me. So I left teaching to fill that gap. And I have really loved being able to empower kids with the opportunities to know that there is only one requirement to being a leader. And I think if you polled your audience, they would have all sorts of different answers. And every one of the answers that they would be giving is actually a quality of leadership, not a requirement. There's only one requirement, and that one requirement is that you make a decision. And we all make decisions every day. So we're all already leaders. Now, what do we do with that information? How do we grow from there? Leadership is something that you develop along the way. And so that piece of knowledge, the more people I can get that knowledge into their hands, the better. And so that's why I love coming on podcasts, because I can share that message with an audience of people who then can share that message with the teenagers in their lives.
Absolutely. I really, really love your mission, and I really, really resonate with it, and it really aligns with my sort of vision as well. I do want to ask you though, why teens? What is it about that age group that you think is so important to impact them at that time?
Well, that's a really great question, because when I first left teaching, I was like, everybody needs leadership. I can do leadership here and here and here and here. And I quickly realized that people who were adults were already in leadership roles. And so for me to try and change their mindset about the requirements and the qualities of leadership, it wasn't really serving that experience. So I was wondering, why are there so many leaders who are in these roles without any leadership training, without any leadership goals and knowledge? And I realized that we don't teach leadership. We don't empower all kids or all people with the knowledge that leadership is something we already have, and then we just develop it. So teens are really an important place because, like you said, they're right on the verge of becoming adults. And so many students leave high school and they're dropped into adulthood without a whole lot of guidance and support. And like they've had so much support in their lives for 18 years. And then all of a sudden they're out on their own, and all of the supports that they've had are there, but they don't know how to find them. So that's why teens, I mean, elementary school kids are making decisions, middle school kids are making decisions. And really, there's not a lot of people out there doing the work with young people to develop leadership skills. There's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of training that is out there for adults. But what happens in the meantime when we're learning to be adults or leaders or whatever? Like, how do we help them? So that's why teens are my people.
I really love what you said. I hope I can remember it now. You said, so leadership is something we all have or we all do. We just need to develop it. That needs to go on my fridge, I think.
It really does, you know, because it is not a belief that any of us have. We believe that either you're born with leadership or you're not. And if we are operating from that belief system and we don't see ourselves as leaders now, then we're never going to see ourselves as leaders. I mean, I use the description, I'm a mom, I was a teacher, I coached volleyball, I was a club advisor, but I wasn't a leader. I wasn't a leader because I didn't have the title that said you're a leader. And when I realized that I was leading in all of those aspects of my life, but I wasn't calling myself a leader, that I was doing a disservice to myself, but all of the teens that I was leading along the way, if I didn't see myself as a leader, how could they possibly see themselves as leaders?
And because I work with slightly younger, just before the teenage bit hits. And the reason I do that is because I'm always thinking the earlier the better. And if I can get the information into them, the earlier the better. And I wonder, with the teens that you work with, when they sort of come into your program or you first get to work with them, what are some of the barriers that you're facing for them to sort of embody that leadership title? Because I think that one thing you just said that was so profound was that you think that you are born a leader, and that's not true at all. And young people, I find a lot of adults too, if I'm honest, have that fixed mindset where they think what's happening to me now or how I am now is how it's always going to be. And just trying to show them that it's not, that you have to have a growth mindset. You can't do it now, but you will eventually be able to do it. So I can imagine that's one sort of barrier to really fulfilling that leadership role. So what other things do you think might present as a barrier when you're a teenager?
I think a lot of peer interaction is the biggest hurdle for any teen. I've talked with different age students, and it's right about the 7-8-year-old age where a 7-year-old will say, yes, I'm a leader. Absolutely, I'm a leader. And then the 8-year-old will say, maybe. And the 9-year-old will say, no, I'm not a leader. And it's that peer impact, right? What will my peers say if I claim I'm a leader? What will my peers say if I say I'm a leader and I make a mistake? What will my peers do and say if I make a mistake, right? So there's this, I need to hide my mistakes because social media amplifies any mistake you have in a negative way. Schools amplify mistakes in a negative way. And so if I'm a young person and I'm coming through and I see this impact my peers have on, and maybe not on me yet, but I see it happening in the kids in the grades above me. I see this interaction and it's not nice, right? We know that kids become really mean.
Yeah.
And it's all because they're insecure about themselves. And so one of the barriers is, what are my peers going to say about me? The other barrier is their own insecurity. And why, when I work with students, I work in games. And when we play games, the stakes are a little lower. the the barriers come down, the guards that are in the way come down, and then one person makes a mistake and it's funny. And then another person makes a mistake and we laugh. And all of a sudden we can have fun with mistakes. And we see that everybody around us is making mistakes. And when we make the mistake, we learn not to do that again. So we're growing, and that growth mindset is evident. And I often wonder why it's not happening in school and where that fixed mindset really happens. But I think it's that fear of what other people are going to say or think when I make a mistake.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was thinking about something, because over here on March the 8th was International Women's Day. And I did a talk about the sort of introverted female leader. And I used an example of a young girl who came to one of my workshops. And there was a lot of big personalities in those workshops. And this young girl presented very shy and quiet, but she was always sharing her ideas. She would put her hand up and she'll sort of look over to the loud crowd and wait till they pipe down, as if to say, I'm waiting to speak, even though she was shy. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, wow, that's amazing, because we have such an example of what we think leadership is, which is loud and sort of extroverted, and you're in the front and, you know, you're commanding the crowd or commanding the audience, and you've got a big personality. And I was trying to kind of show that we need to show there's all kinds of different personalities, and especially young people who think that you have to be a certain way to be a leader, because the society we live in celebrates big personalities, celebrates that one that goes to the front and tramples over everybody else. And I just wondered how you sort of tease it out of the one who's a little bit shy and introverted, who feels that they haven't got the right personality to be a leader. How do you sort of overcome that sort of barrier?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, because I often will get students who are more confident, more loud, more bigger personality, and I watch these other students who identify more in the shy area, and I watch these students who identify or have been identified as problems, and in both of those cases they're incredible leaders. And like you said, they lead in a different way. And so when I talk to students about what leadership looks like, it does come out that there's somebody who can lead, somebody who can stand in front of a crowd, somebody who tells people what to do. And then I challenge them to think about, well, who's listening? And who's doing those things, and why are they doing those things? And they know that the shy student is one of the most powerful listeners and observers. And if you want information, you want to go to that person and ask them what they're seeing and what they're doing. And we don't celebrate that personality until much, much later in life, when that shy person or that shy student is like, wow, I can see so much of what's happening. And let me
Mm-hmm.
tell this one person, and then this one person makes a change, and then they reflect, oh, it's because you were able to share that.
Mm-hmm.
That student or that person is like, I know, I've known, when is somebody going to ask me? And so
Mm-hmm.
I am so excited to hear about that young lady who waited for
Mm.
everybody to pipe down, because often when those individuals share something, you can hear a pin drop
Yes,
because
absolutely.
because
Yeah.
they don't often share, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is just trying to vie for attention and the loudest voice, but the student or the person who is shy is like, let me drop this bomb on you, let me drop this piece of information, and everybody's like, whoa.
Wow. Yeah,
So I
absolutely. I would love to ask you though, why leadership? Because there's so many, or maybe they all fall into the leadership sort of skill set. Because there's resilience, self-confidence, self-esteem. What is it about leadership that makes you think this is what our teenagers, our adolescents need?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever really thought about that question. It just has
Mm,
always been
yeah,
leadership.
yeah.
And because so many things fall under that umbrella, but I
Mm-hmm,
do appreciate you asking me that question, because when I was first a teacher, I gave students, and I had these expectations for students that
mm,
I believed to be realistic. When I became a mom and I had my own children,
yeah.
and I saw what their lives looked like outside of school, it really made me reflect on, what is it I'm asking my students to do outside of my classroom? And
Mm,
so all along this journey, there were moments where I had to reflect on what I was doing and how I was holding people to an expectation, whether it be realistic or not. And then I had an opportunity to work with student leaders, and to be able to have students learn something and share it with their peers
mm,
was a game changer for me. Watching the confidence develop in a student who was able to like take something that they learned
yeah.
and give it to somebody else, it was amazing. And for a long time I was like, am I asking my students to teach for me? But then I recognized that it was just empowering them to take
Mm,
this role that was no other role but leadership.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And those questions where they go, what would you go back and tell your, 16-year-old self, whatever? So when you look at the teens that you work with, what's that burning thing that you want them to know, that you want them to absorb, that is going to literally change the trajectory of their lives?
I mean, I think just telling them that they're leaders already,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I wish, and that's why I created this program and I created this work, is because as a 16-year-old, I
Mm.
wish somebody had told me that I
Yeah.
didn't need to be the best volleyball player, to be a captain, to get a title, in order to be a leader. I didn't have to be the most popular student to be part of student council, to get a title, to be a leader.
Mm.
I wish somebody had told me that I was already a leader and that leadership looks very different than I think it did.
Mm.
And I also wish somebody had told me, and why I want to get in front of teens, is that self-confidence is not something like leadership you're born with. It is something that you can build into. And just because today you say, I am shy and I can't stand in front of a classroom and give a speech, it doesn't mean that you can't get there slowly, in little ways, and do different things and develop that muscle, just like we develop any other muscle in the gym
Yeah.
or any other ability to play sports. It it really prevents us from being the people that we are meant to be when we have this belief system that we either
Yeah.
need to be all of it or none of it. And that binary of right and wrong, success
Mm-hmm.
and failure, there's such a gray zone in between all of those things. But so many of us are under the assumption that if I am not right, I am wrong. If
Mm.
I'm not succeeding, I'm failing.
Yeah.
And and if I can also share that piece of information with kids, with parents, then I know that I have made a difference in
Yeah.
how we proceed and navigate this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what is your sort of, so how do you work with connection? Because you mentioned earlier that you do games because that's kind of lowers the stakes a little bit. But do you work on connecting with them? Is that the best way to get through to your teens? How do you work?
I really get vulnerable. And it
Mm.
wasn't something that I was really good at or really willing to do. I mean, as a
Yeah.
teacher, I had plans A, B, C, D, E, and I never ever told my students when I was pivoting or I had made a mistake. I remember not not owning up to mistakes in my classroom.
Mm.
And when I can pull the veil back and make a mistake in front of the teens that I'm working with, pull the veil back and show my own vulnerability and say, this is something that I did wrong.
Mm.
And this is something that I've learned from, then they're more willing to take a risk. They're more willing to open up. They're more willing to share with the others who are in this learning process with them. And for me, there's no greater value. And
Yeah.
I love that we're on a podcast for parents. If you are struggling in a relationship with your teen, the best thing you can do is own a mistake that you made in a decision you made for that teen. And all of a sudden they're like, Mom, I didn't even see you there.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Because, when the kids are younger, they see you as a superhero. They think you're never wrong. They think you're like up there. And then, but obviously that starts to crack. That image starts to crack as they grow up. They kind of see through it. And then when you yourself step forward and say, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing with this bit, they go, you kind of like, oh, we're the same. We're human, and you get me when I make a mistake because you make mistakes,
Yeah.
and it kind of bridges that gap and creates more of a bond. And I love that you just mentioned about the parents, because I wanted you to maybe speak to the parent. How can they support their teens to be leaders? Is it kind of giving them more responsibility in the home, getting them to do more extracurricular activities? What can that look like from a parent's point of view?
I think as a parent, one of the greatest things I have done for my two boys who will tell me up and down, Mom, I'm not a leader. I'm not like you. And I'm like, okay, thanks. I appreciate that. Um, is to let them make mistakes and
Mm,
not to fix them, which is the hardest thing as a mom. Oh my gosh, I don't
yeah.
want them to fail. I don't want them to stumble and fall. I don't want them to feel vulnerable in front of their peers. But every time I let them make that mistake and they can come back to me and know that I am
Mm,
not going to punish them, I am not going to chastise them, I'm going to learn with them about why did you
mm,
make that decision? Tell me what factors you considered.
yeah.
I have seen my children develop that confidence, that connection, that understanding that that is where they learn.
Mm,
And I really value the conversations that I have had with my 16-year-old who has said to me, I just don't know what to do. And I feel like I have made the biggest mistake. And so we just talk about it. And I have had such a hard time when sometimes those are mistakes are things that really disappoint me,
mm,
you
yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
they're not living my life. They're
Yeah.
living their own life.
That's right. That's right. At some point, you do have to let go because it is their life at the end of the day, and they have to sort of take responsibility for it bit by bit, and that takes practice. So you have to sort of let them do it. But you're right, sometimes that it feels heavy. You just want to save them from everything, but they got to build that muscle. That's where resilience comes from. So as we wrap up, I would love to hear about where we can connect with you online and tell us more about your courses.
Yeah, so I am on most social media platforms at Peers Not Fears, all one word, no spaces. On Facebook, I have a parent Facebook group that's free, and I have it as a space for us all to connect and share ways that we can build leadership within our kids. And that's what it's called. It's called Leadership for Our Kids. And right now, I mean, we're in the moment of where I just discovered the group of students, not all teens, because 13 to 19, that's also a large range.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the 15, 16-year-old students who are in that second year of high school, where they're too old to be sort of coddled and nurtured and loved on, and they're not quite old enough that they're in the drive for adulthood. But so many things are changing in their lives, and we as adults have kind of ignored them, especially in school systems, right? Because we have the younger ones, we love on them, and we have the older ones, we're getting them ready for adulthood, college, workforce, whatever. And there's this moment in high school where they're the high school middle child. That's what I like to call them. Is where they're like just forgotten for a moment in time.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, I don't want any of either end of those things. So I'm really trying to focus in on that second year high school student so that I can get to them and say, you're a leader. Here's what leadership really is, not what we believe it is. And now I want you to go into that adulthood preparation of your third and fourth year of high school, knowing this information and developing it here while you're safe and have the support systems so that when you launch into adulthood, you've had some preparation, you've made some mistakes in a place where you have that capacity. And if you go to my website, that program is available. It's a 4-month online program. So we can be anywhere in the world and we will learn from each other, which is so beautiful. I love that so much. They don't have to worry about what their peers think about them. They could be in this place where nobody knows them outside of our work, and they can make mistakes in a safe and caring environment. And that is my sophomore leadership boot camp. And if you go to my website, which has spaces in between peers, not fears, with little dashes, then you can find the link to get more information about that. And I'm so excited to be launching this program for sophomores, because what a unique time in their lives. And I'm excited to be able to offer it for them.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. But just quickly before you go, why Peers Not Fears? Tell me about that title.
Yeah, great question. So in school, often our peers seem to be friendly, but they're also trying to one-up each other. And so there's all of this fear that's based around being with our peers. And so what my mission and vision is that we create a system where we are peers and we don't have the fear of each other, and we're working in collaboration and connection with each other.
I love that. That is great. That is amazing. Well, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation, and I really, really love what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming and having a chat with me today.
Thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.